So in terms of this session on formula, what we are going to look at and hopefully cover for you is to talk about what we mean by formula problems. So when you see something, you'll know it's a formula problem, a formula question. Understand how you can complete calculations which include formula, and I'm going to give you some chance to practice completing formula calculations. You may need a calculator for some of the questions. You may not. You might want to try pen and paper, an old-fashioned style. And obviously you don't need to do the questions I ask you if you don't want to. But if you do and you've got a calculator nearby or on your phone or something, then just have that ready. So when I do ask you if you want to work with a calculator, great. If you can do it pen and paper, then even better. So different words for formula: algebra, formula, equations. There are others. Personally, I think algebra and equations are a little bit more scary and sound a bit more maths type. Formula sounds a little bit more straightforward and day-to-day. So there are differences between them, but they're ultimately very, very similar constructs with each of them. Algebra has been around since the ancient Babylonians, so we're not going to cover everything within 10 or 15 minutes. I'll hopefully give you an introduction to how we use it within maths. One of the things with formula, I suppose, with functional skills, we talk about how it's relevant to every day, and it is relevant to every day. Formula is one of those topics, though, that's maybe a little bit more, we might call pure maths. It's not every day that we work with formula. We were talking beforehand, maybe every day you look at fractions or percentages, or you might add things up and take them away, or look at increases and decreases in figures. But whether we look at formula every day is a different matter, but it is quite a key maths topic, so hopefully this will go through you. But I'll try and avoid the words algebra and equations just because I think they sound a little bit more scary. So I'm going to ask you a question with words replacing numbers. And my question is going to be, you can put your answer in the chat. If I asked you, what is monkeys plus zebras? Could anybody give me an answer to that question? And you're welcome to say, no, Paul, you've gone mad. We're going to answer 2, we could say, because there's monkeys and zebras, so there's 2. No is what I expected. The answer could be monkeys and zebras, or mebras, or zonkies, I'm not sure, combination. But obviously, in terms of monkeys plus zebras doesn't mean anything. I've got this image, which is actually from an Edward Lear nonsense poem of zebras and monkeys. And if we look at there, and we say, well, there's monkeys on the back of a zebra, well, we can see there that there are 5 monkeys, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we've got 5 monkeys, and there's only 1 zebra. So we've got on 1 zebra. So now if I ask you, what is monkeys plus zebra? Can anybody tell me the answer? Brilliant. Got some answers coming through. Yeah, 6. We've got 5 monkeys and 1 zebra, which equals 6. 5 plus 1 equals 6. That is a formula. That is an equation. You could argue it's algebra. It's everything we need to do, and we've done it in a very simple way. In itself, monkeys plus zebras doesn't mean anything, but once we give it some context in there, then we can do 5 plus 1 equals 6. In terms of how we'd write it to make it a formula, we may say that the animals overall is the letter A. We'll say the monkeys are represented by the letter M, obviously, and zebras by the letter Z. So our formula is actually A, all animals, equals M plus Z, monkeys plus zebra. And obviously it's still 5 plus 1 equals 6. But A equals M plus Z is our formula, is our equation, is a piece of algebra. And that's all we're working with whenever we're talking about formula, is all we're doing is replacing words with letters, we're replacing numbers with words, maybe letters, or whatever it might be. So let's look at that in terms of letters. So a quite common formula that can be used is that to work out speed of something, if you know the distance and you know the time of it, you can work out speed. And the way you do that is you take the distance of something and divide it by the time. So speed equals distance divided by time. Using the same formula, the same sort of idea as I did previously, people often replace those words with letters. And what they'll often say is speed equals S equals D over T, which means speed equals distance over time. And when we get an equation like that, something over something, it also means divide. So speed equals distance divided by time could be represented by S equals D over T. So let's give you a scenario, and this could be a typical question you get in the test. So Emma travels 47 miles from Glasgow to Edinburgh. I should say by car or bus or something. She didn't walk because she walked quite quick, but it takes her exactly 2 hours to get there. I've rounded it nice, relatively easy figures. So my question is, what speed did she travel on average? So using the equation at the top, we want to work out what speed she traveled. So we're working out speed, and we know that speed is distance divided by time, or D over T. So either in your head, on paper, or on a calculator, can you work out what her speed on average was? And just put your answer in the chat if you can. Great, we've got a couple of answers coming through. Brilliant, all correct answers. So we know her distance is 47 miles. We know the time it took her is 2 hours. So therefore, it's 47 over 2, which is the same as 47 divided by 2, which is 23.5. In this case, we said she travelled 47 miles in 2 hours. So the measurement is miles per hour. We could have done it in kilometres per second or meters per minute, whatever it might be. But here we were talking about miles per hour. Now, obviously, if this was a functional skills question, there may be something more. You may have to work out in minutes, or you may add some extra elements on. It might say that's her usual time, but it took her 5% longer than usual. So 5% on, or whatever it might be. But in terms of formula, in terms of what we're looking at today, speed equals distance over time. We've got 47 divided by 2. So taking that first formula at the top, we've easily worked out 23.5 miles per hour. Obviously, the examples there, monkeys and zebras I've given you, and also speed, distance, and time, give you just a context things. But sometimes with formula, and I suppose this is where it might creep more into algebra, we might not have a reason. So the formula I'm going to give you here is A equals F times P. I'm not going to tell you what A means or what F and P means. They're literally random letters that I've chosen, but it still makes a formula. So to work out A, we need to do F times P. One thing to look out for in formula, however, is that would usually be written like this: A equals FP. So you can notice straight away I've taken away the multiply sign. Anybody tell me in the chat, or want to put speaker mic on, they can, why they think you might remove the times. So A equals FP still means it's exactly the same thing, still means F times P. But why might I take away the multiplication symbol? Just got a couple of answers coming through, so I'll give people 10 seconds or so. Yeah, it could just save time, just make things a little bit quicker. It is exactly the same, Dragon Deep, so actually it's fine to do. Mandy, you've hit the nail on the head though. So if we take that first one of A, F, X, P, that X could be a letter. So we're working with letters, and X is a letter as well as multiply. So there could be some confusion there. So that you could read it as A, F, X, P. So well, what does the X stand for? We don't know. So what we tend to do, what tends to happen within calculations or within formula, is we just remove the X, the multiplication sign. If it was add, take away, or divide, it would still say those in there, but we tend to take away the multiplication sign. So A equals FP simply means A equals F times P, but you don't see the multiplication symbol. So that's something to look out for in formula. So if I told you, and again, there's no context to this, I've literally made up chose two random letters, and I said that F equals 7 and P equals 9. Can you tell me what A equals? Some people are ahead of the game already coming up with the answer. So the formula is FP. We've got F equals 7, P equals 9. Yeah, spot on, those people are doing it. 7 times 9 is 63. So a nice straightforward formula. Doesn't mean anything, isn't got in any context, or isn't about Emma traveling from anywhere or anything like that. It's just some random letters, but does give you a calculation. I'm going to take that on a little bit further, using similar kind of things, but slight difference. So now I'm going to put 3F plus P. So thinking about what we've done at the top, if anybody wants to work out the final answer, they can, but I'll take it in a couple of stages. So can you think about what that is asking you to do? We've got a couple of answers coming in already for the figures. Quite fine. If you've got the answer already, that's absolutely great. If you're not sure, I'm going to talk through it in a moment, but just give a few people to think about what we mean there. So we've got 3F plus P. Some more answers coming through. Great. So taking the example I've given at the top, 3F simply means 3 times F. I've taken out the X, as I said, because we don't want to put the letter X in there because it looks confusing, but it is 3 times F, and then we're adding P at the end. So the add still stays the same. You might have heard of BidMass, sometimes known as BODMass, and if you haven't, there's Bitesize webinars on those as well. And the BidMass or BODMass will suggest what order you do things in. And what it would suggest in this case is you do the multiplication first. So if you're not sure what BidMass or BODMass means, then please just ask your tutor or have a look at our webinars afterwards that are on that and cover that. But in this case, it means we do the multiplication first. So I've sort of put it in brackets to separate it. So our 3F just means 3 times 7. And then we add P, which is adding 9. 3 times 7 is 21. Add the 9. is 30, which most people got. And I think Gagadu, you missed the plus sign. So a very common error as well. So we've gone from monkeys and zebras. And for those who just joined the call later, I haven't gone mad. We did look at monkeys and zebras to an equation that hasn't got any context to it. The equation is A equals 3F plus P. No context to that. But you've been able to work that out because we know that 3F means 3 times F. And we know that adding P just means add the P afterwards. So we've got add, take away, or divide could be in there. If it's multiplication, you tend to not have the sign. It will say 3F or 7G or 6Ns or whatever it might be. There are some formulas, and you may have seen, I mentioned the speed, distance, and time already. There are some formulas that are set, and there are actually some that you need in terms of functional skills at level 2 that you're expected to know. Following this this session, what I'll do is I'll send out to everybody who's attended the formulas that you are meant to know going forward. But there are some set formulas that you may have to work with. Now, this isn't one that you've got to learn and remember. And I'm going to give you this one because I can never remember what it is, so I had to Google it to find out. But if you've got temperature in Celsius and you want to convert it to Fahrenheit, a formula you can use is 1.8 C plus 32. So to work out the Fahrenheit is 1.8 Celsius plus 32. That's what the C stands for. So I'm going to show you a map of Australia, which I always think is amazing that Australia is that big that they have places that can be part of the country that's 14 degrees and the top of the country be 35 degrees at exactly the same time of day, which just is crazy to think of the size of that. But my question here is going to be, how much warmer is Darwin than Perth? So I know it's not a massive image, but hopefully you can see at the top there, Darwin is 35 degrees and Perth is 19 degrees, but that's in Celsius, and I want the answer in Fahrenheit. So if we're working out the difference in Fahrenheit between Darwin and Perth, we need to convert Darwin's to Fahrenheit and we need to convert Perth's to Fahrenheit. So can you do that using that formula, 1.8 C, where C stands for the temperature in Celsius, add 32. Can anybody work out what the temperature in Fahrenheit is in Darwin? It's 35 degrees Celsius. What is it in Fahrenheit? So 1.8 C, think back to the previous slide, means 1.8 times C, and we said C was the temperature in Celsius. So in this case, it's going to be 1.8 times 35, and then we need to add 32, because that's what the formula tells us to. That's how we work out Fahrenheit, is we add 32 at the end. A couple of people are just typing in their answers, a couple of different answers. Just give it another few more seconds. Okay, so with Darwin, we said the formula is 1.8 times the degree in Celsius, which is 35, and then we add 32. So again, you're thinking about BODMAS, we do 1.8 times 35, you do that and then add 32. The figure you get is 95 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, a few people have got a different answer, 28.8. So it may be that our calculations that you've done somewhere wrong. So the calculation needed to be 1.8 times the Darwin temperature, which is 35, and then add 32. So that's how we got to our 95. So thinking that same process, can you do the same for Perth? So the temperature in Celsius in Perth is 19 degrees. So we've got 1.8 C, which means 1.8 times C, add 32. So maybe in that first one, it may be the order that you've done things in, maybe it's giving you the 28.8. Some people have gone straight to the answer. That's good. Well done. Some people are way ahead of me. So because some people have gone ahead, I will give you the Perth one. So the Perth one is 1.8 times 19, that's degrees in Celsius, add 32, which some people have said is 66.2. And then we want the difference between them, so you take them both away, which, as you've told me, is 28.8. I should have twigged that when I saw those numbers coming through that people have got to there. So using the formula, and I say, if this was a functional skills test, it would tell you what the formula is. You're not expected to remember how to convert Celsius to Fahrenheit. If you want to do this in real life, you can just Google how do I convert Celsius to Fahrenheit, and it'll give you that formula. But then when you see 1.8 C, because there's no add, take away, or divide, or multiplication sign in there, so you know it means multiply, there's 1.8 times the C value, and then add 32. And in this case, I wanted the difference between two places, so we've sort of added a little bit more. I'm going to give you one, I'm just looking at time. we said this would be a short session, but I'm going to give you one quick more example just because I think it's worth it and you're doing quite well there. And so you were one step ahead of me, so I can definitely push you further. So this is a formula that you are actually expected to remember. And so, as I say, I don't expect you to remember it from here, but I'll send you some follow-up work afterwards. And if you look at our shape and space sessions that we've done before, or some of the online materials that we might share with you about shape and space, this is a common thing to come up. And the formula for working out the volume of a cylinder is this formula. And there's that symbol, which is pi, pi, r squared h, where pi is a set value of 3.14. If you want a more history lesson on it, I did cover that in a shape and space session, but pi is a set value that's always relates to 3.14. R is the radius of our shape and h is the height. So let's say we have a tin of beans and I tell you the radius is 3 centimeters and the height is 6 centimeters. I'm not going through exactly what we mean by that because I'm rushing through because we're only talking about formula. We're not talking about shape and space, so you can do that separately. But can you work out the volume of that cylinder? The formula being pi r squared h. So there's no add, well, there's no add, take away, times or divide symbols in there. So hopefully you remember what you need to do in there. One thing I will tell you is where it's got r squared, whenever you square a number, that means you multiply it by itself. So in this case, I've told you that the radius is 3. So r squared is just 3 times 3. So our formula is pi r squared h. It'll be a few more seconds to see if you can work it out. A couple of answers coming through that look good to me. I actually remember the answer to this one, so I know you're right. Great. So as I said, we've got no symbols in there, but we do know that no symbols basically means it's going to be multiply. If it said pi plus r squared plus h, or take away r squared divided by h, that'd be great, but there's no symbol, so we multiply. We do pi is 3.14, which is a set value, as I told you. Radius is 3, so 3 squared would be 9, but I'll put 3 squared in there, and then the height is 6. So if we multiply those together, we get 169.56, which everybody's done. The radius and the height were both in centimeters, so our answer's in centimeters. And when we're working with volume, we use the cubed symbol, which is the little 3. So the value is actually 169.56 centimeters cubed. Again, if you want to know more about actually working that out and what we mean by volume of cylinder, that is in. We've got some bite-sized sessions called shape and space, which cover cylinders and circles and triangles and all those kind of things. But what you've done there is taken that formula and worked with it, which is great. So hopefully in a very short session, we've gone through what we mean by formula problems, and all we're talking about, I mentioned the word algebra and equations and other scary words and those kind of things, but what we're talking about is where we're using words, or more commonly letters, to replace numbers and calculations. So when we see letters, we'll do that. And we may need to read the explanation. We needed to read earlier on about Emma travelling from Glasgow to Edinburgh. So you may need to read some explanation to work out what the letters mean, but the information will be there. Hopefully you now know how to complete calculations which include formula. So what we do is we find what those letters represent in terms of numbers, and we look out particularly for if there's no add, take away, divide or times sign, then it will usually mean multiplication. So 3f means 3 times f. Pi r squared means pi times r squared. And obviously you've all had a chance to practice completing some formula questions. So it's only a brief introduction, but hopefully to give you a little bit more knowledge about formula. Hopefully means it's not as scary, maybe. So when you see complicated formula with lots of letters and numbers, although that can obviously the more letters and the more figures and marks in there, the little bit more confusing it could be. But actually, if you just take it step by step, I think I'm going to find out what each letter stands for. I'm going to do the calculations in that order. Then we'll do that. What I'll do after this session is we do have some questions on formula that I can send to everybody, and I do have a document that's got some set formulas that you are expected to know at level 2. I won't show those now because some of you may be working at level 1 rather than level 2, and also I don't want to scare you off before you've even seen them, but I will share them with you, particularly when it comes to shape and space. Formulas we use particularly for area of circle, volume of a cylinder we've done there, the volume of a cube, or various other calculations, perimeter, area, those kind of things. So I'll share those formulas with you, and then you can see if you want to use those.